Welcome to the 61st video in the series, Foundations of Communist Organizing. Today we'll be going over the 1980 piece by Il Partito Comunista, The Party Does Not Arise from Circles. So, I've subtitled this, The Party Arises as a Specific Organ, a Party. At this point of historical development within the class struggle, owing to knowledge of the history of party organization, the party can be constructed without going through the phases of development. Going from what Marx indicated in the development of the communist movement in the manifesto, wherein burgeoning worker movements started as individual workers or individual businesses workers attacking the means of production, to unions, to parties, or from small circles of intellectuals and student organizations and unions and their worker councils to the party. This development of the party is not only no longer needed, but is in fact anti-materialist in character. Now the party, at all phases of development, should be doing all the things that a party should be doing, simply at different levels of activity. However, this conception of party activity is empty of comprehensive analysis, unless one starts by defining the party as an organization that carries out all things that a party should be doing, which would be fair, except that they have claimed that the party from the outset does these things without any development from another form, that the party arises formed as a party, not from anything lesser. In reality, quantitative differences lead to qualitative differences. The idea that a small party, an embryo, can undertake all the activities that a large party, an adult, can do is absurd on the face of it. The activities that a large party engages in will be distinct in form, function, and content compared to a small party, as it has greater resources, labor capacity, and so on. An organization that has emergent intelligence, quote-unquote, greater than the sum of its parts as a system, and a small one, cannot be run before it gains the ability to walk. In addition, the goals of different party developmental phases are distinct, and there's nothing wrong with this. The goal of an embryo is to grow so that in the future it can fight, not pick a fight in infancy. Activities that the party engages in are based on allowable external possibilities. In reality, it's also determined by internal conditions, but by the conception of the ICP, wherein they demand that the party be doing all activities in order to be considered such. The only excuse for this is external conditions. From their conception, as indicated in earlier texts, if they are still doing quote-unquote all activities despite unfavorable conditions, even if it is only quote 1%, then they consider it a party. Putting that aside, the party needs to be entering into life of the masses in the form of direct proletarian action, even when these movements attack communism. The party at all times needs to be aiming to move from activity to action, and from propaganda to agitation and mobilization. It does not specify the distinction between propaganda and agitation here, and to my knowledge, propaganda is more directed educational material aimed at developing consciousness, whereas agitation is more broad calls to action. I do not believe that agitation is something necessarily superior to propaganda. In fact, agitation can lead to the proletariat taking wrong action, especially the agitation is harnessed and redirected by bad actors because slogans are easily corrupted. They also claim that the amount of labor and resources spent on the various types of activity of the party are not decided by willpower, but instead by external conditions dictated by the masses' activity. However, this viewpoint is hopelessly myopic. Yes, the party needs to continually hold in reserve resources in order to take advantage of shifts in the proletariat. However, if the party is to be an active agent of history, then it needs to be able to determine what kinds of resources it expends in order to carry out its duties of its own will, reflective of the proletariat in the developing class struggle. All work carried out by the party aims to prepare it to translate the general into the specific when the conditions are right. When conditions are unfavorable, on the other hand, the party tests various activities it is supposed to do to remain as a party, and determines the limitations within the situation. According to this text, the party does not engage in, quote, subterfuges or dubious maneuvers in order to deal with the problem at hand. Instead, in order to, quote, protect itself from contamination, the loss of programmatic basis instead simply turtles rather than trying to maneuver itself in order to escape encirclement. This sort of activity might work if your organization is highly developed and robust and is able to wait out external pressure, but this is neither all parties nor most parties. Simply remaining fallow while under assault without succor will break pretty much any structure. The party is not a sea castle in a siege. Continuing, the party aims to reduce the technical division of labor by way of having everyone move through all activities in the party functions. The party discourages people from having a, quote, personal vocation within it, pushing for everyone working for, within, and at the behest of whatever the party needs at the time. At all times, the party seeks to break down specializations, technical positions, limitations, narrow-mindedness, and so on, and makes it so everyone can spontaneously take whatever action is needed at any time. This also applies to each recursion of the party. They all need to do activities of the party, not one thing in particular. Study, theory, historical research, propaganda, proselytism, and trade union activity. All these activities are interconnected in order to develop the party and its center and periphery properly. All sections need to be carrying out all forms of activity in support of and in congress with all other recursions. All members of the party need to be involved in direct proletarian economic struggles, regardless of position, and in support of that, the party should have specialized organizational structures based on territories, distinct from specific workplaces. It does this with the intent to merge its life and activity with the proletariat, rather than collapsing in on itself and losing its connection with the outside world. In turn, membership in the party is fully voluntary, and people in it should be within it due to agreement with the principles and activities of the party. The party must recognize and support all members, and members should love all of their comrades, not favor some while excluding others. To note, prefiguring communist society would, for instance, involve having free love, as Engels discussed in Origins of the Family. And the reason that I bring this up, and I should probably update this in here, is because there have historically been problems within a variety of parties in terms of relationships. So this is something that needs to be addressed very carefully within organizations to not lead to any sort of issues. Let's just put things at that. I don't want to get into it, but yeah. The party itself is a conscientious organization with a strong knowledge of the conceptions of the membership and their beliefs and needs. However, in the text, there's a whole weird section on how science and rationality are only done thanks to, quote, faith, passion, and feeling. As usual, they do themselves no favor continuing to sound like priests. They say that selection of forces within the hierarchy of technical functions emerges out of revolutionary struggle, rather than being decided ahead of time. People simply take the action they see necessary at a given time and carrying it out to the best of their ability. In an associated manner, if a leader arises out of internal struggle, rather than struggle against the external, then the party itself is weakened by having this leader, rather than strengthened. So basically, if there's some sort of internal political struggle, factionalism where people are disagreeing, and then leadership arises that carry the banner of that factional struggle, then that leadership coming to a either official or unofficial position within the party as a leader spells bad times for the party. Rather, any leadership should arise out of their unflinching fight against the bourgeoisie externally. Continuing. In addition, within an, quote, organic structure, militants and those at the top of the functional hierarchy cannot arbitrarily interpret or give out instructions, order, or repressions, and so on. The limits to activities are clearly defined in the program, doctrine, and tactics of the party. The party itself needs to be dynamic and able to assume whatever form is best for the circumstances to directly oppose capital in support of the proletariat. The arsenal of the party are its tactics, ideology, political and organizational structure, and it must use them all in the best way and time. The party remains on programmatic quote-unquote rails, despite changing at different phases of the revolutionary struggle. In support of this, the program needs to include shifts in the development of the struggle. This means that the party must establish, quote, rules of operation that change at various phases of the class struggle. It does not say what these rules of operation include, how they are distinct from tactics, or their content. Given the use of the term is perhaps a way to continue calling organizations that futile and unable to carry out the activity of a fully developed party as a party, on the grounds that they are carrying out the activities that the rules of operation indicate they should. Either way, these rules of operation respond to specific requirements, quote unquote, and organizational principles in order to not disrupt the underlying party structure. The party's organizational structure should be in line with its program, and it gains centralism and discipline through its basic life activity. If the activity does not increase discipline and centralism, then it should not be carried out. In fact, the party can even dissolve into circles if it fails to maintain its connection to its program, tactics, and organizational principles, fragmenting DSA style, Democratic Socialists of America. They do not address how the state of affairs can be fixed, and if the party is constructed out of non-homogeneous circles, then it would lack continuity, have constant fluctuations and conflicting politics, and despite being nominally one organization, instead be composed of unequal parts that can only be held together via disciplinary rules. In the absence of a way to combine these circles and homogenize them, there are no functional social relations within the party, and it would be completely dysfunctional. Forcing through changes in tactics and the like via disciplinary measures and organizational change is a subpar way to carry out change, as it leads to poor internal relations, distrust, diplomacy, and factionalism controlled by yet more disciplinary action, which trends towards bureaucracy. It is important to ask the functioning of the military organization when that is in play, along with how the party achieves this military organization, which replaces the organic one, at the same time of the social revolution, whereby the party acts as the general staff of the proletariat, along with how the military organization dissolves after the social revolution. To say nothing of when to start adopting one, if there's ever a period wherein the party does not at least have one section that is on military footing. And that is my summary of Il Partito Comunista's The Party Does Not Arise from Circles. As usual, if you'd like to go over the quotations that I derived this summary from, you can go into the description below and you'll find a link to this Google document. You'll also find a link to the United Marxist Pact Discord server if you'd like to discuss this text or any other that have been in any of the series previously. Then we would love to have you. Tomorrow, we will be going over the last piece in this series for the time being, and I don't intend to change that until after the PowerPoints of the various series are finally put together and then published. That will take quite some time. We'll be going over the 1989 piece by the ICP, Parties, Theses, and Classical Evaluations on Imperialist Wars. Anyway, thank you for joining me for today's topical summary, and I hope to see you then.